Have you ever looked at the timeline of human evolution and realized it's kind of broken? Like there is a massive, unexplainable glitch in our own history?
A glitch? Like the simulation lagged? Because last I checked, we climbed down from the trees, figured out fire, and eventually started making podcasts.
On paper, it sounds like a smooth ride. But the math doesn't add up. 7 million years ago, a chimpanzee stood up on its hind legs. For the next few million years, early hominins learned to make very basic stone tools. But here's the crazy part. It took them a staggering 2 million years just to figure out how to slightly change the shape of a stone spearhead.
Okay, so our ancestors were terrible at upgrading. 2 million years for a pointy rock is definitely a failing grade in innovation.
Exactly. Technology crawled along at an agonizingly slow pace. But then, about 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens suddenly appear, brains essentially the same size as ours. And then, absolute silence for another 225,000 years. We were just surviving in caves. Until about 7,000 years ago, in ancient Sumer, everything explodes overnight.
Explodes how? Like they suddenly figured out farming?
Way more than that. Out of nowhere, the Sumerians invent writing, the wheel, complex city-states, advanced mathematics, legal codes, and sophisticated irrigation. Technology went from 0 to 100 in a geological blink of an eye. How does a primitive species suddenly wake up with advanced engineering knowledge?
Okay, that is super weird. It's like a caveman waking up and suddenly knowing how to build a Tesla.
There's actually a fringe author named Ellis Silver who wrote a whole book arguing that humans aren't perfectly suited for Earth. He points out that we get terrible sunburns. Our babies are born completely helpless, and we have chronic back pain because our spines aren't built for Earth's heavy gravity.
Okay, mainstream science probably hates that guy, but my lower back pain completely agrees with his theory. So if we didn't naturally evolve this fast, what happened?
The ancient Sumerians left us thousands of clay tablets telling us exactly how they got so smart. They clearly state that humans didn't evolve naturally. We were engineered, purpose-built to be the perfect obedient workforce for a highly advanced race who descended from the heavens.
Wait, so we are basically biological Roombas designed by ancient sky gods?
Yes, by a race called the Anunnaki. They came from a massive planet hiding in the far reaches of our solar system called Nibiru.
Wait, hold up, I have to put my skeptic hat on for a second. Isn't this entire theory based on that guy, Zecharia Sitchin? Because I've read that mainstream archaeologists and historians think his translations are basically ancient fan fiction. They say the Anunnaki were just regular mythological gods, not alien space miners.
You are 100% correct. Academia absolutely rejects Sitchin. They say he completely mistranslated the Sumerian texts. And Planet 9 or Nibiru is currently just a mathematical hypothesis in astronomy. We haven't actually seen it yet.
Aha! So it's just a really cool sci-fi story.
Officially, yes, but what if we look at Sitchin's story as a massive, ancient, what if? Because the details in his version are terrifyingly specific. According to the theory, 450,000 years ago, Nibiru was dying. Their atmosphere was tearing apart, the ozone was gone, and the sky was toxic.
Sounds like an absolute nightmare. Could they fix it?
Their greatest scientists found only one desperate solution. They needed to suspend microscopic gold particles in their atmosphere to reflect the harmful space radiation. Planetary sunblock. But gold was extremely rare on Nibiru, so they looked toward the inner solar system, and they found Earth. They came here to start a cosmic gold rush.
So these highly advanced sky gods traveled millions of miles just to become space miners?
That was the mission. But the Anunnaki elites weren't about to get their hands dirty. They brought a massive, dedicated slave race with them called the Igigi. Ancient texts describe them as giants, between 12 and 15 feet tall. And for 150,000 years, they were forced into the Earth's crust, digging for gold day after day.
150,000 years of underground labor? That is a recipe for an absolute disaster.
And a disaster is exactly what happened. Igigi finally snapped. A leader named Atrahasis sparked a massive rebellion. They burned their tools, broke their chains, and marched directly on the Anunnaki strongholds.
A giant alien slave rebellion. Okay, I don't care what mainstream science says. That is the most epic prehistoric movie plot I have ever heard.
It was a terrifying uprising. The Anunnaki had superior technology and crushed the rebellion, but it left them with a massive problem. The mines were shut down. The Igigi refused to go back underground, and their home planet Nibiru was still dying. They desperately needed a new workforce.
Let me guess. They looked around, saw some hairy hominids in the forest, and thought, hey, free labor.
Basically, yes. A brilliant but somewhat reckless Anunnaki scientist named Enki proposed a radical idea. He suggested taking the primitive Homo erectus already wandering the earth and giving them a genetic upgrade. Just smart enough to use tools, but docile enough to follow orders.
Ooh, genetic tampering. That sounds like a horrific science experiment gone wrong?
Oh, the early experiments were absolute horrors. They tried crossing Anunnaki DNA with hominids in the lab, and they created literal monsters. Think of the creatures from our darkest ancient myths: Cyclops, Gorgons, two-headed giants. In this theory, they weren't just spooky stories. They were failed, tragic genetic prototypes.
You're completely ruining Greek mythology for me right now.
But Enki eventually changed his approach. Instead of a lab vat, he implanted the successfully spliced hybrid embryo into a female hominid. Less than a year later, the first perfect human was born. They named him Adamu.
Adamu, as in Adam. Like the guy from the Garden of Eden with the apple?
The very same. In ancient languages, Adamu literally means first man or from the dirt. Almost every major religion and culture tells this exact same story. Man being created by mixing the blood or tear of a god with the clay of the earth. We were finally the perfect slaves. But there was a fatal flaw in the design. They made us a little too much like them.
Too much like them? What do you mean? We didn't have spaceships.
No, but we had their desires. We looked like smaller, beautiful versions of the Anunnaki, and soon the Anunnaki leaders started breaking their own strict rules. They started looking at the human women.
Oh, of course. Classic toxic workplace behavior. Even alien bosses can't keep their boundaries.
Exactly. And this forbidden mixing of bloodlines caused the human experiment to completely spiral out of control.
Wait, alien bosses having kids with early humans? What kind of terrifying DNA cocktail did that create?
It created a new breed of highly intelligent, powerful offspring. Some were heroes, like Gilgamesh, but others were monstrous giants known as the Nephilim.
Wait, the Nephilim? I've heard of them. Weren't they supposed to be insanely violent?
They were pure cruelty. They enslaved normal humans, tormented them, and according to some texts, literally consumed them. The world was plunged into darkness. At the same time, the human population exploded. Humans inherited the Anunnaki's greed and started taking each other out over food and land. Earth became a deafening, violent nightmare.
So the lab rats essentially burned down the laboratory. What did the creators do?
The commander, Enlil, was absolutely disgusted. They had finally mined enough gold to heal Nibiru's atmosphere, so they didn't need us anymore. And conveniently, Nibiru's 3,600-year orbit was about to bring the massive planet dangerously close to Earth.
A massive planet swinging that close. The gravity would tear Earth apart, wouldn't it?
Yes, Enlil decided to just let nature do the dirty work. The Anunnaki packed up, boarded their ships, and watched from orbit as the Great Reset began. Imagine the sky turning black in the middle of the day, the ground rolling like ocean waves, and then the seas pulling back for miles before a single wall of water taller than any mountain slammed back across the continents.
The Great Flood.
Exactly. Every human, every animal was supposed to be wiped clean, but Enki, the scientist who engineered us, felt guilty. He broke the rules one last time. He secretly contacted a wise human named Utamishtam, told him the flood was coming, and instructed him to build a massive boat to save the genetic seeds of life.
Utnapishtim. So that is the original Noah from the Ark story.
Yes, written in Sumerian clay thousands of years before the Bible existed. Over 140 ancient cultures around the world tell this exact same flood myth, and it's not because they copied each other, it's because they all survived the exact same cataclysm.
140 different cultures, separated by oceans, talking about the exact same apocalypse. That gives me actual chills.
But what happened after the waters receded is what truly changed human history. The Anunnaki descended from the sky and gifted the traumatized survivors the Reboot package of civilization. They handed us mathematics, astronomy, farming, and writing. That is why ancient Sumer seemingly popped into existence fully formed.
Okay, story time is great, but my inner skeptic is back. Do we have any physical proof of this? What about those elongated skulls they found? Like Queen Puavi in ancient Sumer? Or the Paracas skulls in Peru?
The elongated skulls. Conspiracy theorists love to point to them as proof of Anunnaki hybrids. Some controversial DNA tests in 2014 even claimed the Peruvian skulls had Middle Eastern DNA.
Right, but doesn't mainstream science say that's just artificial cranial deformation? Like ancient cultures binding babies' heads with cloth because they thought it looked cool or royal. And the tomb skulls were just warped by the pressure of being buried for thousands of years.
That is exactly the official mainstream consent. It was a cultural practice, not alien genetics. But if you want real, hard science that makes you scratch your head, look at the Max Planck Institute study from 2022.
Okay, hit me with the real science.
They isolated a specific genetic mutation called TKTL1. This gene is responsible for human brains rapidly multiplying neurons in the neocortex, making us infinitely smarter than Neanderthals Neanderthals. Do you know the difference between our advanced gene and the primitive Neanderthal gene?
What?
Just one single amino acid. One tiny microscopic change created the modern human brain.
Okay, but couldn't that just be evolution? Like, maybe nature just finally rolled a natural 20 after millions of years of trying?
It absolutely could be a natural, incredibly lucky mutation that just happened to stick. But for the ancient astronaut theorists, that one single amino acid looks exactly like a surgical, deliberate genetic edit. Like someone literally flipped a switch in our code.
One single amino acid separates us from living in caves and building skyscrapers. Whether it was evolution or aliens, that is terrifyingly fragile.
It is fragile. And that brings us to the most unsettling realization of all, the grand illusion we've been living under. Have you ever heard of Peter Levenda and the cargo cult theory?
Cargo cult? Like during World War II? The US military set up temporary bases on remote Pacific islands. And when the planes left, the native tribes built fake bamboo airplanes to try and summon the sky gods back?
Exactly. Now zoom out, look at the entire human race. For hundreds of thousands of years, we were hunter-gatherers, conderly across the globe in places with absolutely no contact. Okay, we start building massive stone pyramids perfectly aligned with the stars.
Oh my god.
Yes, Peter Levenda theorizes that human civilization is one giant planetary cargo cult. Someone came down, dropped off the cargo of civilization, and then packed up their ships and left. Our religions, our giant temples, our obsession with looking at the stars. We are just the islanders building bamboo runways, waiting for the planes to return.
That is deeply unsettling. So you're saying every time someone spots a UFO,
every Navy video, every glowing orb over a military base, it's not an invasion. It is just the sky gods flying back over the island, checking on their grand experiment. And the scariest part, based on the mythical tracking of Nibiru's 3,600-year orbit, its next major transit past Earth is estimated to be around the year 2900.
The year 2900. So they might be coming back. What happens when the creators realize the lab rats have built nuclear weapons and artificial intelligence?
That is the ultimate question. By the time they return, we won't just be holding wooden headphones. We will be mining asteroids, exploring Mars, and editing our own genetics. The next time the Anunnaki arrive, they might be shocked to discover that humanity has evolved into the new gods.
Honestly, I kind of want to be there to see the look on their giant alien faces.
It will definitely be a clash of the titans. Until then, keep questioning the narrative. The real history of the world might just be a mix of myth, science, and secrets buried deep in our own DNA.
Thanks for joining us in the Weird Zone, guys. If your brain is officially broken right now, hit that like button. See you next time.